We chose the theme of our conference almost a year ago. My husband decided to build a greenhouse, and when he was building that greenhouse, I just started to think about the fact that so many similarities between a garden and how we raise our children exist. And so I thought, you know what, this would make a great conference. And my husband and I have been discussing it for pretty much this whole year, since it was about September, October last year when he made the greenhouse. So we've been pondering this, and we thought today we would talk about some ways that homeschooling is like having a garden. And we always want to start with, what does the Bible say? The Bible is our primary textbook at Homeschooling Torah. And so we're going to open up the Bible, and this is what we've been doing at our home. Honestly, it's been an interesting adventure because, first of all, I found out that Yehovah, our creator, is a gardener. Gardening is incredibly close to his heart. So I want to take you, first of all, to John 15, which this is where Yeshua is talking, and he makes it clear to those listening that his father is a gardener. And I bet you in the first century when Yeshua was talking to his disciples, they didn't understand this either, any more than I do. So it says, Yeshua says, I am the true vine, John 15:1. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. A vine dresser is somebody who takes care of a vineyard. Of course, we know in Israel there are massive vineyards, and it's one of the things that Israel is known for. It's beautiful vineyards. And it says that my Father is the vine dresser. He thinks a lot about vineyards and all of the things that can come from them. That just blows my mind a little bit. And it says in Genesis 2:8, Yehovah Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. So he plants a garden. He's already made everything, almost everything. He hasn't made the woman yet, but he's made almost everything else, and he decides to plant a garden. So not only does he think a lot about gardens, but he planted the very first garden. I'm imagining it must have been amazing. And we find out, if we keep reading in that chapter, that he planted it for the purpose of making a home for Adam and his wife to live. So he thinks that being in a garden all the time is a really great way for humans to live. And I agree. So then we come down to verse 15. It says, Yehovah Elohim took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and guard it, or keep it. And Yehovah Elohim commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat. And of course he goes on to say there was one tree he couldn't. But he decided to take the man and put him right in that garden. He intends for humans to be in a garden. And it is interesting that it was the humans, the man's, his job to tend it and take care of it and to guard it, which tells me that there are two things we have to do for our garden. And boy, have we found that out in the last year since we started thinking about this conference and gardening. We were visited this year by all kinds of lovely groundhogs and rabbits and moles, and not sure if we had deer. I don't think so. Mostly groundhogs. And boy, it has been a battle all year long. The other thing that we've had happen is we have some invasive plants that have been taking over the edges of our garden, and my husband has had to come out pretty much weekly and fight those plants. So the man has to guard the garden that he is in charge of, and he also tends it. And it becomes a daily habit to go out to the garden and check all your plants, make sure that there's nothing wrong with them, make sure that they have the water that they need, keep things from bolting, just on and on. And so that was Adam's original design, and that is what the Father, he cares so much about gardening. Next, I'm going to go to Isaiah 51:3, and it says, Yehovah will comfort Zion. He will comfort all of her waste places. And how is he going to comfort her? He will make her wilderness like Eden, and her desert like the garden of Yehovah, and joy and gladness will be found in it, and thanksgiving and the voice of melody. So the fascinating thing is, if he finds something in this world that is barren and desolate and not producing the way he intended it, he takes it and makes it like a garden. And specifically in this verses, he takes Zion, the people of Zion, and he turns them into a well-watered garden. He puts everything back in this creation to the way that he intended it to be. And we, as his people, the people of Israel, grafted in or born in, we are being turned into a beautiful garden. So I wanted to keep that in mind this week as we talk. I wanted to also go to Numbers 24, verse 6. And this is Balaam talking. He's seeing all the ways that Yehovah has blessed Israel. And notice what he says. He says, "How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel, like valleys that stretch out, like gardens by the riverside, like aloes planted by Yehovah, like cedars beside the waters." I'm just thinking that is so amazing, because the best blessing that he can think of to bless Israel is to say that they are like a well-watered garden that was planted by Yehovah himself, and contains all kinds of plants that are not only beautiful and restful, but healing, like aloe. So whatever is hurting the world can be healed by the garden that Yehovah plants. Now, it seems like Yehovah thinks that we as his people should be gardening as well. Let's go to Amos 9:14. And in Amos 9:14, we're going to hear a little bit about what he intends the world to be like someday when he restores all things. He says, "On that day, I will raise up the tabernacle of David, which has fallen down, and repair its damages. I will raise up its ruins and rebuild it as in the days of old, that they may possess the remnant of Edom and all the Gentiles or the nations who are called by my name, says Yehovah who does this thing. Behold, the days are coming, says Yehovah, when the plowman shall overtake the reaper, and the treader of grapes, him who sows seed." In other words, there'll be so much bounty that they can't keep up with it. They'll be still picking the bounty when it's time for the next harvest to be planted. "The mountains shall drip with sweet wine, and all the hills shall flow with it." That means vineyards again. "And I will bring back the captives of my people Israel, and they shall build the waste cities and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and drink wine from them. They shall also make gardens and eat fruit from them. And I will plant them in their land, and no longer shall they be pulled up from the land that I have given them, says Yehovah your Elohim." So I see that like the ultimate picture of restoration back to the land is when we will be planting gardens and vineyards, and they will be amazing in their beauty. And not only will our gardens not be able to be pulled up, but we also will not be able to be taken from that land and from that beauty. So this is obviously his incredible design. Now, let's go back to a little bit about Yehovah himself and what he's like as a gardener. I'm going to go back to John 15 where I started. And he says, again, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser." Now, if I go down to verse 8, it says, "By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit. So you will be my disciples." So how will people know that we follow Rabbi Yeshua? Well, they'll be able to tell because we bear much fruit. Now, of course, he could be talking about the final day when we are fantastic gardeners. This is a homeschooling conference, and we're going to not talk completely about gardening the whole time. We're going to talk about homeschooling our children. And obviously, he wants us to bear much fruit in our children's lives as well. Let's take a look at that. It says in Malachi 2:15, talking about a man and his wife, "Did he not make them one, having a remnant of the Spirit? And why? He seeks godly offspring," or the word there is a seed. He seeks a godly seed. So he's looking for someone, a couple, who will produce godly seed from their marriage, godly fruit. The fruit that we produce in our marital gardens is children. And we obviously want them to be strong and healthy plants that can't be uprooted. So we'll spend a lot of time talking about that. Of course, in John 15, we also find out that the gardener doesn't just plant a garden and expect it to produce a lot of fruit, but he works really hard to prune it and make it just perfect. It says in verse 2, "Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me." We're going to talk a lot about that this week, about how we can prune our children and abide with them and make it so that our spending time with them makes it possible for them to bear much fruit. Now I'm going to go down to Deuteronomy 20 verse 6, where Yehovah talks about some of the priorities in the Torah. Now he's saying to the men in this passage, he's saying, you might have to go off to battle. You that are 20 years of age and older, you might have to defend Israel against all of their enemies. But here are some exceptions to people that have a higher job that is more important than even going off to defend this country. He says, "What man is there who has built a new house and has not dedicated it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in battle and another man dedicate it. So building a home is incredibly important as a priority for men. Another one, what man is there who has planted a vineyard and has not eaten of it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in battle and another man eat of it. So planting and providing food for his family is incredibly important for a man. And then it says, and what man is there who is betrothed to a woman and has not married her? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in battle and another man marry her. So marrying a woman and raising up godly offspring, seed from that marriage, is incredibly important. So food, a home, and children are incredibly high priorities in Yehovah's list of priorities. And so he says these are so important that they are more important than even defending Israel. There are other people that can do that, but raising up a godly home is super important. Let's go to Psalm 127 and 128. It says, unless Yehovah builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. So you could go back and try really hard, not go to battle, go back to your house, build it. But unless Yehovah is with you and you are doing things according to his plan, you're laboring in vain. Unless Yehovah guards the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early and to sit up late and to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he gives his beloved sleep. Behold, children are a heritage or inheritance from Yehovah. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a mighty warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but shall speak with their enemies in the gate. Do you see how important he feels like home and garden and children are? And continuing on into Psalm 128, blessed is everyone who fears Yehovah, who walks in his ways. When you eat the labor of your hands, you will be happy, and it will be well with you. Your wife shall be like a fruitful vine in the very heart of your house. Your children like olive plants all around your table. Behold, thus shall the man be blessed who fears Yehovah. Yehovah bless you out of Zion, and may you see the good of Jerusalem all the days of your life. Yes, may you see your children's children. Do you see how high a priority home and garden, and especially a wife and children, are to Yehovah? The highest of priorities, the very purpose for which he made us, is to be fruitful and multiply, it says back in Genesis chapter 1, the very heart of what his intent was for his creation. Gardening is incredibly important. And Yehovah is a gardener, and one of the ways he planted a garden was to make families who would have children who would be arrows in the hand of a mighty warrior. So not just children that are neglected and never taught. In fact, one more place I want to show you, and this is Genesis chapter 18, verse 19. And Yehovah says of Abraham, for I have known him in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they may keep or guard the way of Yehovah to do righteousness and justice, that Yehovah may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. So even when he founded the people of Israel through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he did it because he wanted them to command their children and teach their children and guide them in the ways of righteousness and justice. This is what is important to our Father. How can we be a good gardener? I thought of 8 tips. I'm just going to give them to you really quickly, and we're going to go much more detail into all of these ways through the next couple days. First of all, I think that a good gardener has the ability to plan and organize, just like Yehovah planted a garden. And everything was so incredibly organized and thought out in his creation. We see his design everywhere around us. I think if we want to have a good garden and be good gardeners, we have to have the ability to plan and organize. So we're going to talk about how to do that in this conference. Number 2, I think you have to know how to prepare the soil and add nutrients to the soil. Everything that makes a garden grow is all about the soil and the condition of the soil. So we're going to talk about that. How do you prepare the soil to make it the best kind of soil possible? And how do you add nutrients to that soil so that your children will grow strong and true and be able to produce much fruit? Number 3, I think you have to have quality seeds. And you have to start those seeds right. You can't just haphazardly throw them out into the soil and expect things to happen. I wish, as I've thought about that in my garden, like, why is this so hard? Well, it takes time, first of all, to find quality seed. And then you have to know how to start those seeds well and protect them, especially when they're very young. Number 4, you have to assemble the right tools. You're going to have to prune, you're going to have to dig, you're going to have to plant, you're going to need all kinds of tools. It's not just a matter, again, of just going out and putting seeds in the ground. In fact, we used to think that gardening was pretty much free. You go out, put the seed in, free food. Well, not so much, because you're going to have to get tools. And those tools aren't always free, but you have to know which tools are the good ones. So you don't want to go to the store and get something that's just a piece of junk. Number 5, you should probably keep a gardening journal. You should keep track of what you're doing, what works, what doesn't work. I encourage all moms everywhere to have a journal for their homeschooling, just like you would for gardening. So you got to keep track of things. You got to write down what you're learning. You got to learn from other gardeners, and you got to keep track of that in a journal. Number 6, you need good gardening habits and a schedule to your garden. Things have to be planted at certain times. You can't miss those windows of opportunity. You have to be checking the weather forecast. And to do this, you need to have the habit every day of spending time in your garden. And you got to figure out when is the best time to do things. So it's about paying attention to the time of day, to the weather, to all of these things. And so you really need good habits and a good schedule. Then you have to consistently exercise patience, because you know what? You don't get fruit overnight. It takes an entire gardening season. And sometimes you're wondering if you're going to see anything from all the effort and work that you've put in. So you have to exercise patience. I remember when I was a child and I planted some seeds, and then I kept pulling them up to see if anything had happened. Nothing grew because I wasn't patient. And we as parents can't expect results overnight. It's not always easy. You have to stick with it. You have to endure throughout the entire gardening season. And finally, a lot about gardening is just enjoying the moment, about just getting out there and doing it. You really need to enjoy every single day. Yes, today is sunny. Other days might be cloudy and stormy, but they're all amazingly peaceful out in that garden, and you really need to enjoy the moment. Same way with your kids. So I hope we'll take those gardening tips and it will help you out as you become a better gardener.